Australian companies find themselves in a period of intense change. The digital revolution continues with a combination of analytics, continuation of Moore's law, and just the explosion of connectivity that's bringing possibilities to business that were inconceivable even 2 or 3 years ago. We have a government and a set of regulators that have been woken up by issues like the Royal Commission, by inquiries into energy, by inquiries into aged care. Much more activism is there from a regulatory front. And this in many ways is responding to shifting customer expectations about institutions and about what they stand for and who they are, with a much heightened sense of transparency, both demanded by customers and government, but also created and demanded by their own employees. And finally, what we're seeing as well is that we're in a macro environment where there are no easy earnings. Interest rates are subdued, demand is subdued, and businesses are struggling to find the case to invest. So that combination of factors actually puts a pressure on CEOs and boards to really think about where is their next growth coming from, and more fundamentally, what will their business be in the future. So what do you do if you're leading one of these big companies at the moment in Australia? We believe the first thing you've got to do is understand the magnitude of the change that's actually happening. There's no company that doesn't understand the forces and doesn't have in some document somewhere or hasn't had some conversation with their board or with their leadership team, a conversation that includes all sorts of trends that are happening, whether they're technology, whether they're regulatory, whether they're customer, or whether they're macro. But actually understanding how big this change is and the playbooks that are going to be needed in order to respond, that's where we think the big difference is. The strategy question is not about where do we grow beyond the core. The strategy question they have to answer is what will be our core business in the future, and how do we make sure we're going to continue to be viable and profitable. The question as they think about how to design their organisation, it used to be, how do I optimise it? Because I was trying to run the business well. Now the big question is, how do I change the organisation quickly to harness technology? And that's why concepts such as Agile, which were startup concepts, are now finding their way into big companies. There's also the whole question about technology. There used to be some executives who got tech and some executives who didn't. In fact, it was IT, and most of the time it was a big system project that was delegated to someone else. Now it's how do we actually harness information and technology, data, analytics, and actually flexible modern architecture to drive change. And finally, the playbook for how you actually make change happen, or transformation as a much used word, is actually different. You have to move much faster, you have to move with much greater intensity, make changes that are much bigger, and cut across all sorts of lines of accountability. And if you're the CEO in this environment, you're the only one who can pull it all together. You can't delegate out the change and let people do their jobs and check up on them. You actually need to set the vision, bring the board along, bring the stakeholders along, and pull it all together at your leadership team. So it's a really important era for Australian companies. There's an enormous amount of change, and the need to respond requires a real boldness in our leaders.